Some things only happen in soap operas, and in real life too. Just ask the man who went out to celebrate a $100 million contract and came back home wanting to sell even his watch. If you're someone who loves a good story, go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe. Otherwise, you'll miss the rest of this tale I'm about to tell straight from the porch, with weak coffee and one eye on the past. It was one of those nights that looked like it had been painted by hand. Clear sky, humid air, soft French music, playing in a fancy restaurant on top of a glass building. And there he was, Marcello Braganza, Italian linen suit, brilliant white smile of someone who's made it in life, and a bottle of champagne worth more than most people's cars. Marcello wasn't just rich, he was the rich guy. Heir to an agribusiness empire, owner of 3 green tech startups, and the kind of man who'd never had to say sorry in his life. That night was his. Government contract signed, headlines in the news, and a new woman on his arm every week. But fate, that screenwriter with a dark sense of humor, decided that night would be more than a toast. It would be the first sip of the end. The glass had barely touched his lips when she appeared. Walking with short, almost silent steps, the restaurant's cleaning lady, hair tied back, tired face, broom in hand, invisible to every suit at the table, except him, and not because he was sensitive, far from it. It's just that she accidentally dropped a wet rag at his feet. As she bent down to pick it up, she murmured something, a hoarse, dragged-out whisper. "Il est vivant, monsieur. Il sait." Marcello froze. He looked at her like he was seeing a ghost. What did you say?" But she was already turning her back as if nothing had happened. The others laughed, toasted again, cracked jokes. "You drunk already, Braganza? Hearing French now, are we?" But Marcello didn't laugh. He knew that phrase. He didn't just understand French. He'd studied in Switzerland for years. He knew exactly where he'd heard those words before. In a letter, stained with blood, 15 years ago. His stomach twisted. His hands trembled. And the past started whispering louder than the background music. "Il est vivant. He's alive." But who? The cleaning lady had vanished, and Marcello left the glass, left dinner, left everything, walked out without paying, without saying goodbye, his heart pounding like a war drum. What did an invisible woman know that he had spent years trying to forget? And why did the whisper of a stranger feel more real than the life he was living? And that, my friend, is where the real story begins. Some people live their whole lives unnoticed, cleaning others' messes, swallowing their names, sweeping their own stories under the rugs of the rich. And some people think money can bury the past. Marcello Braganza was one of the latter. But that night, that cursed night, an invisible woman spoke a sentence that sliced through time like a razor. "Il est vivant, monsieur. Il sait." He is alive, sir. He knows. Marcello left the restaurant like a man lost at sea. The elevator felt too small. The glass revealed all of São Paulo blinking lights that meant nothing. He walked the sidewalk like a drunk, but the only thing he'd swallowed was fear. Outside, the city continued as normal. Horns, motorcycles weaving through traffic, the smell of smoke and concrete. But inside him, a storm. He grabbed his phone, searched his message history, trembled while looking for an old number he was sure he'd deleted. Nothing. "No way," he murmured, but his heart said otherwise. He reached his car and collapsed into the seat, rubbed his face like he could scrub the memory off. That phrase, he'd read it in a letter. 15 years ago, a letter that should never have been opened, addressed to his father, Otávio Bragança, the untouchable family patriarch, found inside a book in the private library on their farm, stained with dried blood and dated August 12th, 2009, the same night as the fire. The same night Jean, his adopted brother, disappeared without a trace. Jean, the frail French boy his father brought back from the war in Africa like a rescued stray. They grew up together, laughed together, almost like blood brothers, until everything went up in flames. The police called it an accident. Marcello never believed it, but he also never asked. Until now. He gripped the steering wheel. Who is this woman? The next morning, Marcelo showed up at the restaurant before sunrise. The manager tried to stop him, but he pushed through with his investor badge. "I want the employee list from last night. But Mr. Marcelo, I'm not sure if—" "You're sure? Because if not, this restaurant chain will be serving boxed lunch by next month." With trembling hands, Marcelo flipped through the pages until he found her. Leah Fontaine, born in Marseille, France. Night cleaner, hired 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks. Too much of a coincidence. Marcelo looked at the badge photo, the woman from the whisper, the scarf on her head, the deep eyes of someone carrying more past than present. He went to HR, got her address, an old building in Capão Redondo. He drove there, his heart pounding, but what he found wasn't what he expected. The apartment was empty, doors wide open, fridge bare, a broken plate on the floor and a note, handwritten in French. If he remembers who he was, it'll hurt, but if he doesn't, it might kill. The handwriting was familiar, and on the back, a crumpled photo. Jean, age 18, standing next to Leah, holding hands. What did this woman know? Who was she? And why, after 15 years, had she appeared now? Marcelo left with the photo in his pocket and a past on his back, heavier than any fortune. Because some things we bury thinking they're dead, but some pasts dig their way back. They say if you go looking, you'll find, but no one warns that what you find may be worse than what you lost. Marcelo spent the rest of that day in silence. No contact with his partners, assistant, or the blonde from the night before asking if he got lost in the after-party. He did, but not in a party, in the past. That morning, for the first time in years, he drove to the old Bragança family farm, a place now used more for corporate events than for living, but that's where it all began, and maybe where it all ended too. The road was dusty, just like he remembered. The automatic gate still bore the Bragança crest. And the smell, eucalyptus mixed with fresh manure, the kind of scent that never leaves your memory. He stopped the car, got out slowly, his feet sinking into the earth like the ground wanted to swallow him whole. He walked to the back, where the stables once stood, now just storage for plastic boxes and cleaning supplies. But that was where he and Jean used to play war with tree branches and old cans. Jean, the French boy no one quite understood, who spoke to horses like they were old friends. Quiet, sharp, with a scar on his chin he claimed came from dodging a bombing. Otávio Bragança brought Jean home after a trip to Ivory Coast. Said he was the son of a diplomat friend who had died tragically. Never really explained, just showed up with the boy and a stamped passport. The family accepted it. After all, no one said no to Otávio. Marcelo, aged 11, became brother to 10-year-old Jean. But it wasn't quite like that. Jean was different, too observant, too smart. And over time, he started to make people uneasy. Once, Marcelo overheard his uncles whispering, "That kid knows too much. Otávio's crazy to bring that into the house. It's going to be a problem." And it was. On the night of the fire, Marcelo woke up to smoke, ran through the halls as screams echoed across the farm. The flames were coming from the building where the company's archives were kept. Jean was gone. His father said he'd run away, maybe started the fire, called him dangerous, and no one ever mentioned it again. Marcelo, still a teenager, swallowed that version, swallowed it hard, and never spoke Jean's name again, until now. Holding the photo, Jean and Leah, hand in hand smiling, he felt like he'd betrayed someone who only wanted to be loved. He went home without saying a word, locked himself in the office and opened an old folder inside the safe. Old documents, adoption records, flight tickets, and a letter. Yes, it was still there. The same letter he'd read at 23, hidden from his father. It said, "Otávio, if he finds out the truth, he'll hate you. But if he doesn't, he'll destroy what you built. Choose your poison." Signed, CD, and next to it, a yellowed business card. Clinique Durance, Marseille, France. Marcelo's blood ran cold. That was it. That's where he had to go. If the past wanted to be dug up, then he'd use both hands. He picked up the phone, called his lawyer. "I need a jet to Marseille, tomorrow. Any urgent reason?" A brother, alive. But while Marcelo crossed the ocean, a figure watched everything from afar. In a dark corner of the farm's security monitors, a middle-aged man, unshaven, eyes that had seen war. Jean. Yes, he was alive, but what he wanted now wasn't a reunion hug. It was truth, and maybe vengeance. Marcelo Bragança arrived in France like someone returning to the womb of the earth. Marseille welcomed him with the salty Mediterranean wind and a nagging sense of déjà vu. The sky was grey, the air heavy, and the GPS seemed to guide not just the car, but his ghosts, too. The Clinique de Rance sat on a remote hillside, between abandoned vineyards and trees that seemed to whisper among themselves. It wasn't a regular clinic. It was one of those old institutions with wrought iron gates, stone walls, and windows placed far too high for anyone to escape. He was greeted by a white-haired lady with a tight bun. Her badge read, Madame Clémentine. She looked Marcelo up and down, as if his last name was stamped on his forehead. Monsieur Bragança, nous attendions votre retour depuis longtemps. We've been expecting your return for a long time. He froze. Expecting me? She nodded with a faint smile. Votre père a laissé des instructions. Your father left instructions. Instructions. Otavio Bragança. Even in death, still moving chess pieces. He was led to a room that smelled of antiseptic and old wood. The windows offered a view of the sea, but Marcelo saw only shadows. Clementine handed him a folder tied with red string. Inside, medical documents, old photographs, and a cassette tape. A nurse entered, set up a tape recorder, and pressed play. The voice that played was his father's, Otavio Bragança. If you're hearing this, it means I left before the truth reached you, and maybe that's for the best. Marcelo clenched his fists. The room shrank around him. The boy, Jean, he wasn't just the son of a dead diplomat. He was my son too. The tape crackled. Marcelo's heart dropped. It happened during a trip to Dakar. A woman, a mistake, a child born in chaos. I tried to make it right, brought him here in secret, raised him as best I could. But the world doesn't forgive bastards. Marcelo struggled to breathe. The tape continued. Jean was too smart. He uncovered things. About the company's contracts, about the smuggling of modified seeds in Africa. He wanted to go public. He wanted justice. More static. Then, the fire. But I swear, I didn't know he'd disappear, that someone would silence him. Marcelo stopped the tape, looked at his trembling hands. Jean didn't die, he whispered. He ran because he knew he'd die. Clementine stepped closer. Monsieur Jean spent years here, in silence, in shock. He repeated only one phrase, like a mantra. Il est vivant, il sait. The same phrase the cleaning lady whispered. Now it made sense. He left a few months ago, disappeared, but he left this for you. She handed him a weathered leather envelope. Inside, a single page in bold handwriting. If you want answers, find the man with the anchor tattoo. He saw, he knows. Signed, Jean. And tucked in the envelope, a map of Brazil, more specifically, the coast of Bahia. Marcelo stood, envelope in hand, face like stone. He's pulling me back. No, monsieur, Clementine said with an ageless gaze. He's pushing you forward. Outside, the wind blew stronger, and with it, a memory. The night Jean spoke about an old fisherman who saved him from drowning as a child. He has an anchor tattooed on his chest, says the sea sinks the body, but returns the soul. Marcelo closed his eyes. Now it all made sense. And once again, everything was starting from zero. But on the other side of the ocean, in a forgotten village, an old man lit a lamp and looked at the tattoo on his chest, the anchor. The time's coming, he murmured, staring at the sea like talking to ghosts. Family? Some aren't even worth the last name. Marcelo Bragança returned to Brazil like a man revisiting a crime scene. But this time the GPS led to a village so remote, even satellites barely knew it existed. A forgotten patch of sand and salt called Pedra Seca, deep in southern Bahia. Few people, little light. a lot of history. He rented a 4x4, drove through dirt roads, dodged branches and mud, and finally arrived. The village was a cluster of crooked houses, a bar that also served as butcher shop and church, and a constant smell of fish, mildew, and nostalgia. The first thing he saw was a boy, about 9 years old, sitting on a log, sucking on a mango and staring at him like he recognized someone who didn't belong. "You're not from here." "Perceptive. Who you looking for?" Marcelo gave a faint smile. "A man with an anchor on his chest." The boy sucked the mango seed, wiped his mouth on his shirt, and pointed with his chin. "Follow the mangrove trail to the boatman's house, but be careful. He doesn't like visitors." Marcelo walked the trail like someone stepping through forgotten time. The mangrove rose like living walls. The ground sank beneath his feet. The birds screeched as if they knew everything. And there was the house, simple, some rotten wood, an empty hammock swaying, and the sound of someone sharpening a knife in the back. "Your name?" The voice came dry, without greeting. "Marcelo Braganza." The boatman stepped out of the shadows. He was a big man, carved by sun and hardship. Pale blue eyes, wild white hair, and on his chest, yes, a faded anchor tattoo. "I know why you're here," he said, turning his back. "You do," Jean told me. "Said one day you'd show up, that when the father died, the brother would return." Marcelo followed him to the back of the house. There, on an improvised altar of candles and a crucifix with missing arms, was a photo. Jean, in his 20s, long hair, serious eyes. "He told you everything?" "He did." "And you believed him?" The boatman spit on the ground. "I saw it with my own eyes. I saw the farm's car on the trail, saw the two men beat him, drag him, and throw him in the sea, thinking he'd die. I pulled him out of the water with broken ribs and a shattered soul." Marcelo clenched his jaw. "Why didn't you go to the police?" "Police?" The boatman scoffed. "You know who ran that place. Otavio Braganza had more power than the mayor, more money than the prosecutor." Marcelo sat on a stool, face in his hands. Everything he believed about his father was rotting from within. "Is Jean still alive?" The boatman took a moment. "Yes, but not in the way you expect. He's another man now. Changed his name, changed his face with surgery, lives among boats and shadows, and he'll only show himself when you prove you deserve it." Marcelo stood up. "And how do I prove that?" The old man looked at him like weighing his soul. "By bringing to light the truth the Braganza name buried. There's a notebook, a journal, buried in a place only two people knew. One's dead, the other is standing in front of me." Marcelo felt his stomach drop. "Me?" "Yes. Jean took you there as kids, said you buried a treasure near the lookout, where the ground smells like guava, and the wind whistles differently. It was the journal, hidden because he knew your father would never let him live with it." Marcelo remembered, vaguely. But remembered, a round stone, a tree with two branches. That's it. Everything's in there. Names, dates, political transactions, bribes. Everything Otavio dirtied and laundered in blood. The sun dipped low, painting the mangrove orange. Marcelo looked toward the horizon, like someone at the end of the road, or the beginning. "And if I find that journal?" The boatman answered without blinking. "Then Jean will find you. But brace yourself, son, because what's written in there could make all of Brazil tremble." Meanwhile, on a weathered boat anchored 20 kilometers away, a hooded man stared at an old photo of two boys on a farm and whispered, "You're close, brother, so close. There are memories we hide so well, even the soul forgets where they're buried. But some smells, my friend, some smells not even time can erase." Marcelo left the boatman's house with burning eyes. It wasn't salt. It wasn't wind. It was the truth getting too close to his face. He walked the trail back with the childhood map burning in his mind. Every curve, every stone, every branch, with a name. When he reached the high part of the slope, the wind changed. That was the place. The old lookout where he and Jean used to climb to watch the sea like they owned the world. The ground was dry, cracked, with tiny purple flowers growing in the fractures. The smell, ripe guava in the wind. just like the boatman had said. And the sound, a thin whistle from the brush, making the skin crawl like the earth was telling secrets. The round stone was still there, half buried, and the tree, with two branches stretching like arms to the sky. Marcelo dropped to his knees, hands trembling. He dug with his fingers, then a rock, then a makeshift shovel nearby. Sweat ran like tears. His chest heaved. The earth felt too heavy, as if resisting every inch, until he felt it. A dull thud. Wood. He stopped. His heart did too. He pulled hard. It was a small, rusted metal box, the size of a shoebox, locked with an old padlock, and taped to the lid a faded note. If you made it this far, it means you still have a choice. What you open can never be closed again. Signed, J. Marcelo smashed the lock with a large rock. Inside, wrapped in thick, damp plastic, was the journal. Leather cover, written in French and Portuguese. Tiny, precise handwriting. He sat in the shade of the tree and began to read. The first pages were memories from Jean's childhood, fears, loneliness, the feeling of being a foreign object in the Braganza house. But as he turned the pages, the tone shifted. Dates, codes, descriptions of meetings. Otavio Braganza signing contracts with shell companies, redirecting shipments of banned seeds from Africa to Brazil, with support from ministers, military men, and even an archbishop. But what made Marcelo stop breathing was the entry marked Night of the Fire. I was called by Otavio to the shed. He said I knew too much, that if I spoke, my mother, still alive in Dakar, would pay with her life. He beat me, locked me in, set the fire, but I escaped through a passage he himself had built. I fled, burned part of my face. The boatman found me. Since then, I've been a shadow. Marcelo let the journal fall into his lap. His father had tried to kill his own son, and he had grown up repeating his father's version, calling Jean ungrateful, a fugitive. The weight of that guilt fell on him like a stone cross. He vomited right there in the bush, cried like an orphaned child, pounded the ground, screamed into the wind. Why? But the wind said nothing. Back in the village, the sky had turned purple, streaked with distant lightning. Marcelo went to the central bar and asked for cachaça. 1, 2, 3, but none would go down. The bartender, a short man with a straw hat and lazy eye, approached. "You're the brother, huh?" Marcelo looked at him. "How do you know?" "Because he said the day you cried at the lookout, Brazil would finally see." "Brazil?" The man handed him a flash drive. "It came with the journal. He said to give it to you, but only if you came back, with your head low." Marcelo held the object like it was dynamite. "What's on here?" "Recordings, evidence, footage. Everything Jean gathered after he escaped. He didn't vanish. He spied, filmed, recorded, and built what he called the rot dossier." Marcelo ran to his guesthouse room, opened his laptop. The first image, Otavio Braganza, already old, handing a black suitcase to a senator. The second, scanned documents with signatures, transfers, bribes. The third, Jean, partially masked, speaking directly to the camera. "If you're seeing this, Marcelo, it means I trusted you. But the final piece is still missing, and only you can get it, because you've had it from the beginning." The screen went black. Marcelo froze. From the beginning, what was he carrying and didn't know? What hadn't Jean said yet? Outside, a motorcycle stopped in front of the guest house, and in the mirror, a face Marcelo hadn't seen in 15 years. Jean. But this reunion wasn't coming with a hug. It came with a choice, and maybe a sentence. Some things are heavier than guns, debt, or betrayal, like the look of someone you once loved, now looking at you like a stranger. Marcelo came down the stairs of the guest house with his heart beating out of rhythm. The motorcycle's engine still echoed in the dirt courtyard, coughing like it knew this reunion was too heavy for a human chest. Jean was there, 20 years older, face half covered by a navy blue bandana, cap pulled low. But the eyes, oh, the eyes, were the same. Eyes of someone who had seen too much and trusted too little. "So you came," Jean said, emotionless. "I did. And you cried?" Marcelo nodded slowly. "I cried." Jean pulled a cigarette from his jacket pocket, lit it with a rusty lighter, took a long drag. Then, without looking directly at him, said, "My brother died in that fire." Marcelo frowned. "Tugush, what do you mean? The brother who believed in our father, who thought the world was fair, who thought the Braganza name meant protection, that one died. What's left is me, a beast, a living archive." Marcelo stepped closer, slowly. The wind rustled the palm leaves, mixing salt and diesel in the air. "I found the journal. I saw everything. I read it all. And I'm still here." Jean exhaled smoke slowly. "Then answer me one thing, Marcelo. What do you want now? Truth and justice? If possible, that too." Jean turned, walked to his motorcycle, opened the seat compartment, and pulled out a thick envelope sealed with red wax. He handed it to Marcelo. "It's all here. The names of politicians, the money laundering network, the forged contracts, the people killed to protect this empire. This envelope was prepared 5 years ago, and it had to be delivered by you, because, to the world, you're still the clean Braganza. Why now? Because you made it here. Because you felt real guilt. Because I saw you on that hilltop on your knees, face in the mud. That's what I needed." Marcelo held the envelope like it was burning. "If I deliver this, everything collapses." Jean nodded. "Everything, including our name. Especially our name." The silence between them lasted seconds, but weighed like centuries. Marcelo looked at the envelope, then at Jean. "And after this, what happens to you?" Jean smiled for the first time. A crooked, pained, but real smile. "I vanish again, but this time in peace." "And the cleaning lady? Leia?" Jean lowered his gaze. "She was the daughter of the woman who hid me when I escaped. She grew up hearing my story, came to Brazil to work and look after me from afar. She told me when your father died, she's the one who whispered in French, 'to shake you.'" Marcelo took a deep breath, and it worked. Jean extended his hand. "Now it's up to you." Marcelo shook it. "It's up to us." The next morning, Marcelo Braganza walked unannounced into the federal prosecutor's office. He placed the envelope on the prosecutor's desk with a handwritten note. "Sorry it took so long. The truth took 20 years to arrive, but it arrived." Signed in a way no one expected, Jean Marcelo Fontaine Braganza. Meanwhile, in an old warehouse in Bahia, Jean looked out at the sea one last time. Yeah, the sea sinks the body, but gives the soul back. He stepped into a canoe and rowed away, knowing that at last the anchor no longer chained him. Now it set him free. Some crashes make noise, but some are silent. Silent like a headline, like an echo in the halls of power, like the panic in the eyes of those who thought they were untouchable. And it was that kind of silence that spread when the envelope reached the federal prosecutor's office. At first, no one understood. A security guard saw Marcelo enter alone early that morning, face set like stone and a black leather folder in hand. He walked past reception, ignored reporters, ignored aides, went straight to the federal prosecutor's office, placed the envelope on the desk like a will, and left without saying a word. Hours later, when its contents were opened, the world began to fall apart. The first pages made it clear this was no hoax. Names, dates, offshore accounts, videos of secret meetings, audio recordings with crystal-clear sound, big names, senators, ministers, top-tier agribusiness executives. A scandal that crossed borders, exposing a corruption network using agricultural companies as fronts for genetic tech trafficking, illegal deforestation, and the smuggling of biological materials. But what made the investigators stop breathing was one specific video: Otavio Braganza, in the flesh, sitting in a leather chair, with a glass of cognac in hand, speaking directly to the camera in an almost mocking tone. "If this video ever gets out, it means someone betrayed me. And if it was Jean, well, maybe he has more Braganza blood in him than I thought. That voice shook Brasilia's halls of power. Dossiers were opened, plea deals exploded, and once untouchable names were suddenly printed on arrest warrants. 2 senators were arrested. A former minister fled the country. A famous CEO attempted suicide. And Marcelo? Oh, Marcelo became the pivot of a revolution, from Forbes cover to whistleblower, from millionaire heir to public enemy, and unlikely hero. Death threats came, lawsuits followed, smear campaigns tried to paint him as a traitor, a madman, a drug addict, even a political plant. None stuck, because one thing couldn't be erased. The truth was all documented. And the more Marcelo spoke, the more people came forward. Former employees, illegitimate children of other businessmen, people silenced, humiliated, erased for decades, now raised their heads. Marcelo became a symbol, but he didn't like it. "I'm no symbol," he said in an interview. "I'm just the first to say I was complicit. I'm not anymore." He began using the money he had left, and it was still a lot, to build a foundation, not in his name, not his father's either, but the name of the man who turned everything upside down, Jean. The Jean Fontaine Foundation was created to support whistleblowers, threatened witnesses, and families impacted by environmental corruption. The first headquarters was built in a repurposed warehouse in the same city where his father had started the empire. The soil still smelled like soybeans, but now it also smelled like justice. At the opening, Marcelo gave a speech with a steady voice but misty eyes. "Some people think a bastard is just someone born outside marriage. But a real bastard is someone who lives outside the truth, and my brother was the most legitimate of us all." The crowd stood, applauded. Journalists wept. A humble old man shouted from the back, "He didn't die in vain." Marcelo looked up at the sky. "No, he didn't. He's here, in every voice that doesn't have to stay silent anymore." But the story wasn't finished. One piece was still missing. One night, Marcelo received a letter, handwritten, no return address. He opened it carefully. "Brother, I did what had to be done. Now I'll live how I choose. You don't need to find me. Just keep going. Maybe one day we'll meet where the sea doesn't swallow and names don't weigh. Live light, live right, live for us both." Signed, J. Inside the envelope, one object, the anchor pendant Jean used to wear as a child. Marcelo pressed the pendant to his chest, and in that moment felt his heart beat like it used to when they played sword fights with tree branches on the farm. "You're forgiven, brother," he whispered, "and I'm trying to forgive myself too." Outside, the city lights came on, but Marcelo turned off the office lights, sat on the porch, and for the first time in a long time, smiled without fear. Because when a name no longer fits, you start over with another, and what he was writing now wasn't inheritance, it was legacy. Far away, on a lone boat, a man with a trimmed beard fished in silence, the anchor tattoo still there. But what he carried now was lightness. Some silences weigh, they choke, they scream without sound. But some silences heal, prepare, sow. And it was in that kind of silence that Marcelo Bragança, or rather, Marcelo Fontaine, as he now signed, began to rebuild his own soul. Because the empire had crumbled, the mask had fallen, the name shattered, but something new was sprouting, a root. What once was a glass-walled boardroom was now a foundation with concrete floors, filtered coffee, and people with their pasts written across their foreheads. Volunteer lawyers, exiled journalists, indigenous people who lost their land, women who lost children, all gathered by a shared wound, a truth no one wanted to hear before. Marcelo wasn't the boss anymore. He was just another worker, and that was freeing. In the talking circles, he listened more than he spoke. In the foundation's assemblies, he took notes in an old notebook. In the coffee line, no one pulled rugs. They pulled conversation, and most started with, "Aren't you that guy from the scandal?" I was. Now I'm just someone trying to pay for what never should have been bought. One morning, he got an unexpected visit. Leah Fontaine. Yes, the woman of the whisper. The cleaning lady who changed everything with a handful of French words. She arrived simply. Cotton blouse, firm eyes. "I came to see what you did with what you heard." Marcello offered coffee. She accepted. They walked the foundation halls. She observed the wall of names, the archives, the photos of the reports being investigated. "Didn't expect this from a Braganza," she said. "Neither did I," he replied. They stopped in front of a mural with the names of everyone who helped build the foundation. At the center, in golden letters, Jean Fontaine. "Does he still write?" she asked. "No. He disappeared for good. But he sends letters, short ones, always signed J. The last one said, 'Now I'm wind,' and wind spreads seeds." Leah smiled with her eyes, touched the mural with her fingertips. He was afraid he'd be remembered as a mistake. Now he's become root. Marcello pulled up a chair. They sat facing the garden. Where there used to be rubble from the old Braganza estate, now grew a community garden. "What you said that night at the restaurant changed everything," he told her. "I knew it would. I just didn't know if you'd listen." "I did. Late, but I did." She stood and handed him an envelope. Inside, a wooden cross on a string. Simple. Worthless in money. "Jean sent this last time, said it was yours, from when you two used to build churches with rocks." Marcello held the cross and smiled. He still remembers? Remembers everything, but carries little. Leah said goodbye with a firm hug, the kind that cracks old ice and leaves a good scar. That night, Marcello climbed to the foundation's rooftop. From there you could see the city pulsing in the distance, people living, sleeping, dreaming. He held up the cross, like lifting his own heart. "It's here, brother, in my hands, and it's going to keep going, even without you by my side." He turned on his phone, opened the recorder, and began dictating the foreword of a book he was planning to publish. This story isn't about downfall, nor betrayal. It's about finally listening to what we've spent a lifetime trying to silence. It's about a name that stopped weighing and started planting. And at the end of the recording, in silence, he cried, "Not from pain, from harvest, because when truth takes root, silence blooms."